My name is Rick Sivers. I'm president of the Oswego Players. I want to welcome you to the Francis Marion Brown Theater. Kevin?
Good evening. My name is Kevin Hill, and I am the president of Safe Haven. I'm very happy that you could all join us, and I'd like to just make a few thank yous. Thank you to the Oswego Players, all of his staff, all of his volunteers, his actors, everyone who has brought this play together. Thank you to our board of directors who are spread throughout the audience. Thank you to the community members who are here tonight. I really appreciate it, and we really appreciate you coming out to support us. The mission of Safe Haven is quite simple. Our job is to keep alive the story of the nearly 1,000 European refugees who came to the United States to escape the atrocities of the Holocaust. So tonight we're hoping to give you a little sense of that story. It's not sugar-coated. It is raw, it is natural. It's their words, their thoughts, their memories. It's in the minds of the refugees, and I think that's the only way to tell the story. I hope you enjoy the production, and I'd like to remind you that after the play there is a reception at the museum, which is just a few doors down. So I hope that you'll all join us at the reception. So thank you and enjoy the show.
We're required to do some logistics. Exits, I always feel like a flight attendant. Exits here and in the back. There are exits, emergency exits backstage, but I don't know that you would want to try to get to them. So would ask that no flash photography. It just is very disconcerting to all of us on stage. So sit back, absorb the message, and thank you again for coming. It's New Year's Eve. But this isn't just any New Year's Eve. It's the last to be celebrated in the Fort Ontario Emergency Refugee Shelter. In only a few more weeks, those refugees who are left in the shelter will experience freedom for the first time in 18 months of encampment at the fort on the banks of Lake Ontario. Many had not known freedom for many years, not since Adolf Hitler's Nazi killing machine had begun ravaging Europe, sending families into hiding across the continent, into mountain retreats and foreign countries. Most of those refugees were Jews, fleeing what has become known as the Holocaust, hidden by friends and strangers alike, hidden by people who risked their lives to save them from the hideous hatred and bigotry that fueled Nazism. The world had been drawn into the struggle for freedom, and after many delays, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed the order to allow a limited number of refugees to come to this country. This weary band of the homeless, seeking freedom in the land of opportunity, who came with the dream of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, found that their dream would not come quickly nor easily. Sadly, some would never come to know the true meaning of freedom. For most, there was always the glimmer of hope, even if it was often just out of reach. On July 21st, 1944, the United States Army transport Henry T. Gibbons left the port of Naples, Italy, with 983 refugees aboard, arriving in New York Harbor on August 3rd. Aboard the Henry Gibbons were the refugees, were also 698 wounded U.S. soldiers, 132 U.S. Army officers, civilians, Red Cross, and American Field Service workers. The majority of the refugees were between the ages of 41 and 60, but there are also 187 children under the age of 16 and 116 persons over the age of 60. They spoke 20 languages, came from 17 different countries, and while the majority were Jewish, there were among them Roman Catholics, Greek and Russian Orthodox, and Protestants. Following their successful transatlantic trip in 1944 aboard the Henry Gibbons, one of the refugee family members wrote this: "Thank God for you, Henry Gibbons, ship of dreams laden with bedraggled brethren, dark and fair, tall and short, all frail-boned and gaunt, each and every one a survivor, reborn in the wake of conscience. Blessed is their leader, Ruth Gruber, praised her leader, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and you, Captain Korn, your kind face and outstretched arms, your smiling crew, their helpful hands, your great vessel's stalwart bulk, hallowed halls, glistening white toilets, your sky-crowned decks surrounded by sea-speckled rail, a far cry from barbed wire. Divine are you, clean, fresh air that fills sunken sheets, lungs ashen from the fires of Auschwitz, Birkenau, Bergen-Belsen, Buchenwald, Dachau, Treblinka. And you, buoyant sea, revered for strong currents, changing tides, gulls that glide the breeze and assuage wounded spirit. And you, dining halls, bejeweled with vegetables, cornucopia of meats, kaleidoscope of sweets that swell shrunken bellies, smooth withered souls. Are you America? Soft pillows and ample blankets, nestled in vast tiers of bunks, nightmares you help smother, sweet dreams you set in motion, talent shows, chess tournaments, movies. Are you America? Oh, most wondrous throng my ancestry, it is you who are American, my America. after New York City came a long train ride. The refugees arrived in Oswego and saw the shelter at Fort Ontario for the first time on August 5th, 1944. For some, it was a haven, away from the conflict from which they were escaping. But others saw its chain-link fence topped with rows of barbed wire as nothing more than another concentration camp. Had they come all this way just to be locked away, to be forgotten? Prisoners in a foreign land where the hope of freedom suddenly transformed from a dream to a nightmare? Only the months ahead would dispel the fear and usher in the freedom they sought.
My name is Steffi Steinberg. Walking off the train and into the emergency refugee shelter, none of us knew what to expect. It was a warm, sunny summer day. There was lots of government and Army personnel on the grounds, eager to help us and check us in. We first were ushered into the mess halls for our first American breakfast, much to everyone's enjoyment. Next came the distribution of towels and sheets, and after that, we were directed to our respective barracks. They'd been divided into individual family lodgings with 2 communal showers and bathrooms, upstairs for men and downstairs for women. But now we discovered, which to me was the most amazing thing of all, on the doors of each of these lodgings, as we were ushered down the narrow hallways of the barracks, was the name of the particular family who was to move into that particular little apartment. So, in we moved. Sometimes, when I start to think about how much I've changed in these months that I've been in this country, I really wonder what will have become of me after a few years on American ground. Yes, I must have changed, as everybody. Oswego citizens and even Fort Ontario inhabitants consider me as an American girl. More than once it's happened on my entering one of the buildings here at the shelter that someone has said to me most politely and in very gentle English, "Good morning," or "Good afternoon." An Oswego girl, looking rather astonished at me, recently asked me, "Are you a refugee too?" "Oh, yes, sure." "Oh, well, you don't look like it." But, do you want to know why I've become so Americanized? I'll tell you. Just because I wear a pair of glasses. American glasses. Yes, that's what America has done to me and why I'll never forget her. Since I'm here, I have to wear glasses. Where in the world would it have occurred to me to put on a pair of spectacles? On the other side, no doctor could have convinced me to do such a thing. But here I try to find comfort. It seems to be an American custom if it could also help make me a citizen of the United States. Now, what else has America done to me? It's changed my taste completely. I always used to wear sweaters, but they ended just where the skirt began, right in the middle of myself. But now, for heaven's sakes, don't give me a short sweater. It must be long, the longer the better. And the socks must be exactly the same color. Whether the sweater is blue, green, yellow, red. Oh, red, yes, that's it, red. I have this red sweater and not a pair of red socks that suit. I remember 2 years ago, my mother wanted to buy red socks for me and I wondered if she really meant it, but today red socks to me is cute. But now I want to be serious for a moment. Even though I'm older than most of my high school classmates, it was truly wonderful to be able to go to school. The principal, Mr. Faust, made certain we could go. He was our friend. What a fantastic and unbelievable feeling it was for us when, in a white cap and gown, we proudly participated in the commencement exercises of the 1945 Oswego High School graduation. I was awestruck. What a thrilling and exciting moment it was when I received my diploma. certainly the unforgettable highlight of my Oswego experience. I've learned to love this country, its people, its customs, and my greatest wish is that one day I can speak of it as my home.
Sit down, Steffi. You said enough.
What is it, Rena? Do you want to say something?
I want to tell my story. My American name is Rena Block. I was born in Sarajevo. When the Nazi marched in Zagreb, where we lived at the time, I was already 5.5 years old. The Nazi had a big celebration. People threw flowers at them. It wasn't long before I found out this was not a parade, and this was not going to be a good time. So my father arranged our escape to Italy. We spent some time in the villages until we were rounded up by the Germans. We were sent to southern Italy. We were interned in a camp for about 1.5 years. It was behind barbed wire, and that's what caused the same feeling about the barbed wire here. The Americans came from the south, and because of the fighting, the Italians just opened up the camp. They fled to the mountains. After the fighting quieted down, the Americans that were there moved us away from the fighting. The word came that only a certain number of us would be taken to America, and we were lucky to be picked. I remember the long time across the ocean. It was very cramped on the ship. It was made for soldiers with bunks that slept 2 and 2 and 2 6 stacked on top of each other. The other half of the ship was full of wounded soldiers. It was beastly hot. A lot of children were barefoot. They didn't have any shoes. The deck was burning hot. Some of the soldiers set up buckets with holes in them to make showers to cool off a bit. We came to Fort Ontario with these new experiences, new foods, and new surroundings. The fence for the first few days really bothered most of us until we realized the people of Oswego, even though they were curious about us, wanted to help. They wanted to do something nice for us. They came with gifts, books, dolls, and for the winter, ice skates, sleds, and snowsuits. We got to go to school. Schooling during the war had been off and on. Somehow, we all made it. Schooling is important. I am an honor student.
When the refugees first arrived, they were quarantined in the shelter for 30 days. No one was allowed to leave, and no family visitors from outside could come in. Yes, the fence reminded them of a concentration camp, and the train ride had evoked images of boxcars overloaded with people wedged together on their way to extermination camps. Yet some saw Fort Ontario as a villa on the lake, a paradise of sorts away from the gunfire and the threat of Nazi resettlement. Once the gates had been opened, there was contact with family who had previously moved to this country, and the refugees had limited freedom to move around Oswego. Inside the shelter, there were many ongoing activities. In some ways, it was a microcosm of society. Classes of all kinds, for all ages, work details, a hospital, synagogue, theater, orchestra, library, scout troop, even a weekly newspaper, the Ontario Chronicle, whose associate editor was Edmund Landau. The initial issue of the Chronicle on November 8, 1944, proposed this.
You may ask, why do you print a paper in English since only a few of us speak or understand this language? We reply, it is not only impossible for technical reasons to edit a newspaper in several languages, but we consider that our newspaper will help you to learn and understand the language, which is the language of the country where you live. We know that our English is not perfect, but we hope that it will improve in the future. As our space is limited, it will be impossible to publish every contribution or article. The selection will be done by the editorial staff of our paper, composed of professional newspapermen and guided by the interests of the whole community. Therefore, the editorial staff will be completely free and independent from any council, committee, or subcommittee existing in the shelter. We invite you to not only be our diligent readers, but also to be our collaborators in order that our newspaper, which for simple reasons excludes any discussion of political, religious, or philosophical character, becomes a paper of the shelter, by the shelter, and for the shelter. I am Edmund Landau. Since my boyhood, Saturday and not Sunday is my real holiday. For the simple reason that Saturday greets you with long leisure, while on Sunday a busy week lies before you. Therefore, on Saturday I walk in the city. On my way to Oswego, I meet many fellow residents going out or coming back, and on the corner of the Bridge Street I hear a mild voice whispering, "Mr. Landau, I have an article for you." "Swell, thank you so much, madam, and on Monday I will rush on it as if it were a new gold field in California. But now, excuse me, I walk in the city. The sky is blue and the sun shines. One of the rare lovely days during this hard winter. And I remember when, months ago, at such a bright sunny day, only warmer, I left the shelter for the first time to shop in Oswego. The impression was great. Broad and clean streets, neat houses in the colonial style, shops stuffed with goods of all kinds, which during as many years existed only in my fantasy. And everywhere I was received with kindness, with this spirit of hospitality and willingness to help, which constitutes my greatest and happiest experience since my arrival in the U.S. These feelings of a midsummer night's dream have not changed during the winter's tale. And when I observe my fellow residents shopping or sipping an excellent coffee in a comfortable coffee shop, I feel that they will agree that Oswego is a small but fine city. During the 15 years before World War II, I lived in Paris. And I assure you, friends of Oswego, that your bridge streets, so broad and well illuminated, can compare with a grand boulevard in the City of Lights. I'm particularly impressed by two things: the lights over the city and the houses. Now, according to history, good Henry IV, King of France, promised but never held it that every citizen may have his chicken in his pot. Have the Americans not infinitely more realized when such neat and comfortable houses are the standard lodging for the average citizen? Before I return to the shelter, I pay a quick visit to the city library, where there are so many excellent books and a perfect service. There, I make a third observation. It may be a public library, a hospital, or a school. All institutions constructed for common welfare are bright, comfortable, and modern. And I have the impression that no money is spared, neither in their installation nor for the maintenance. And I feel that I'm not mistaken when I say that in the United States, the community, and not the self-seeking individual, is in the center of the picture of American social life.
Life began to settle into a routine at the shelter. There were 189 children between the ages of 5 and 21 attending schools in the city. 500 refugees were learning English. When the first blast of winter blew in across Lake Ontario, Landau and the other members of the Chronicle staff reported that Fort Ontario was not Siberia, as many believed. With so many refugees coming from the warm Mediterranean climate, it may have seemed that the shelter bordered on the edge of winter's worst fury. To keep residents warm during those cold winter months, a rotating work detail stoked the shelter coal furnace.
My name is Arpad Buchler. My home is Zagreb. There, I was a successful merchant with a very good business, until the Nazi came to Yugoslavia. We fled to Italy, and now I'm here at Fort Ontario with my elderly mother, my wife Rena, and our 4 children. Paul, who is 9 years of age, Blanca 8, Dan 6, and Hannah just 2. I arrived at the shelter on the threshold of liberty and security. But I was never able to pass over that threshold. You see, my life ended on February 19th, 1945. I was working a rotation in the coal yard. I left for a few minutes to visit my sick mother in the shelter hospital, then went straight away back to the yard to finish my shift. There were 6 others working in the coal yard. When I got back, I told Herman Freudenfeld to take a little rest. You have shoveled enough, I told him. Now I will work, I said. We were digging a tunnel into a large pile of buckwheat-sized coal. This is the way we did it, so we could load the trucks easier. I took the shovel, stepped into the tunnel, and suddenly, the coal above me let loose. And with a thunderous crash, fell on top of all the workers. I was farthest into the tunnel and was covered by those black rocks, its weight crushing me, leaving me unconscious. There I lay in the darkness, the heaviness pushing down on every part of my body. Ernst Braun was partially buried but dug himself out. The others looked around and, not seeing me anywhere, realized I must be buried under the coal. So they dug and dug through that pile of coal, and it took them nearly half an hour before they found me, barely breathing. They took me to the shelter hospital where my mother lay ill. And that is where I died. At my funeral, several hundred residents of the shelter gathered. They said I was a good man. Afterwards, nearly all shelter residents walked with my casket to the train station, where I was taken to the Jewish cemetery in Syracuse for burial. I knew only a taste of freedom. I was a stranger in a country that welcomed me, the land that now forever holds me.
Arpad Buchler was one of 11 refugees to die in the shelter. But there were also 16 births. Life ends, life begins, life goes on. It was the fence, a see-through barrier. Some despised it, some saw it as protection. For each, it had a different meaning. When Bronco Kaufman came to the shelter, all he had to wear on his feet were wooden clogs. So many of the refugees had been running from the Nazis for so long, from town to town and country to country. They often had no more than the clothes they wore. One day, Kaufman was standing by the fence, just looking out at the scenery beyond his reach, when a man came up and asked him why he was wearing wooden clogs. Telling him they were the only shoes he owned, the man walked off and disappeared into the city. But he came back, and he handed a new pair of shoes to Kaufman through the fence and disappeared again. So the fence was not always a wall to fear, but sometimes a gateway to friendship.
The fence made me feel safe.
A fence is a fence. It separated us from the outside world. How are we supposed to tell the difference between life on one side from the other?
There was a hole in the fence. When it was warm in the summer, we would sneak out and go down to the lake. And I would never tell my parents.
Rena!
Don't tell Mama. A whole new world opened up when we went outside.
There was one hole that was big enough for 2 people to walk through. There were other places to crawl under to visit with new friends, and some of the local teenagers would sneak under the fence to visit with shelter refugees. 2 of the teenagers from the shelter, Adam Muntz and David Hendell, crawled under the fence and hitchhiked to New York City. They spent the day sightseeing in the city, slept in Central Park, and then came back to the shelter.
One day my mother crawled through a hole in the fence to get on the train
to New York City for her cousin's wedding. My mother was very gutsy. So what do I think of the shelter and Oswego? The lake, the big broad blue lake, a beautiful frozen lake in the winter, and a wonderful swimming in the summer. Once I almost drowned trying to swim with the older kids to rock dividers in the lake. But a boy I had a crush on, David Hendell, rescued me and swam me to shore. You had to be 15 to be allowed to go to the movies in the evenings. I'm only 13. But sometimes my good friend Liesel Batter and I would sneak in. We explored the old fort and played Johnny on the pony. I felt safe for the first time since leaving Europe. There were no more bombardments, no more Nazis. Mrs. Roosevelt came to visit Fort Ontario. I was standing behind all the camp officials, and she shook my hand. Her visit made me feel that we were all important. There was so much to do. I loved being a part of the dance performances, theater rehearsals, Mr. Merkovic singing, Mr. Presser's play announcements. I would forget that I am living in a camp surrounded by a large fence. My father was much happier than in Italy, and my sister has many friends.
Life is a series of connected experiences. Some of those experiences we create ourselves. Some consume us from beyond our control. And some are just part of the never-ending cycle that is called life on planet Earth. For nothing that they had done, other than who they were, countless millions of people were branded as unacceptable people. People who did not conform to the espoused standards of a perceived normal within the manic, convoluted minds of bigoted hate-mongers. Diversity, which is the human condition, became the cause célèbre of those who attempted to purge the world of differences and create a super race of sameness. It was, in itself, a cleansing, to rid the world of all those who did not satisfy the parameters of those progenitors of intolerance. The Holocaust was not the first such attempt, nor will it probably be the last. Yet we must strive to defeat the cause before it becomes a movement. Out of these horrendous times arise survivors, some by their own determination, some plucked out of the midst of horrific and unspeakable terror to tell their story to the world.
When the Allies liberated Rome, I was hiding in a Catholic convent. I found myself alone in this convent, where I was, of course, protected, but in mortal danger, because even there, the Germans came in. They had penetrated, they had overwhelmed Italy, and I was very close every day to being deported. And I knew that if they get me, I would not make it out alive. But I was chosen to come to the United States.
I was chosen as well. I had worked with the underground for many years, trying to liberate France and all of Europe from the Nazis. The Gestapo had my name as a member of the underground, and I knew that. So I was always on the move, hiding, escaping from camp to camp, shelter to shelter, village to village. I had no legal status, and I was lucky to escape every time. I asked to join the French army, but they refused. Until finally, they allowed me to join. But I had to put up with the rage of officers who hated Jews as much as they hated Germans. We live in a world of hate. After much anguish from being separated from my family, I met with my mother and my sister Liza. We ended up in a camp. That's where I met Manya. And I knew right away that I wanted to marry her.
We fell in love. We wanted to get married right away. We did not want to be apart. At that time, the Germans were killing us, as the French said, like rabbits. So I was aware of what I had to face, of what we had to face, and that we were sentenced to die. And what is it like to die? Ask any person. Everybody wants to live, and I wanted to live.
After we were chosen to come to the United States and aboard the Henry Gibbons, I went to the captain and asked him if he would marry us.
But he said since the Henry Gibbons was a warship, he couldn't marry anyone.
We would have to wait until we arrived in the United States to be married.
When we arrived at the shelter, it was like for the first time I woke up without the pain of having to face the day that I was supposed to die. It was like heaven. I felt like I had been reborn in Oswego.
But once again, we would have to wait to be married. We were under quarantine. As well, we could not leave the shelter to get the proper paperwork needed to be married. But Ruth Gruber, who did so much for the refugees already.
She worked for the Secretary of the Interior and had helped get us out of Italy to Fort Ontario.
She helped us to get married. She brought us to Oswego City Hall, got us the paperwork we needed, and we were married.
It was the happiest day of my life.
Mine too. We held another service here with the rabbi at the shelter, remember?
We stood under the hoopah while Rabbi Bialik blessed the marriage.
He handed me a goblet of wine, and I took a sip. Then I put it at your lips, and you took a sip. Then I took a ring and slipped it on your finger, the one that May Tompkins, your new friend from Oswego, gave you. Then Rabbi Shakova blessed us, and Rabbi Bialik put a glass on the floor.
And said we'd break this glass to remind us, even on this day of joy, of the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem.
And I broke it like this.
You all remember, you were all there. It wasn't that long ago. See the ring that May gave me? When she gave me that ring, she gave me hope. She gave me a lot of love and healed a lot of wounds in my heart.
Of course we remember.
Karoline, you remember too. It wasn't that long ago.
Now we have a daughter, Diana, born right here in the shelter in the United States. Ever since I have been here, I have felt this energy that was given me to develop my life here in the United States and live as a human being. And being left from such a horror is to be like a messenger, to let the world know what it is like to have faced a world of hatred and prejudice and not letting any other human being live.
There! I think I see him in the window!
Who? Who do you see?
What is it?
Get down off that ladder right now. Hear me? All of you, get away from that ladder. Walter, you might fall and get hurt.
It's all right, Karoline. They're just children.
Children die too, you know.
That's his window, over there in that factory. His name is Mr. Clark. We call him Clarky. He came to the shelter and started a Boy Scout troop. We're in Troop 28. When I came to the shelter, my family had been running for 6 years. My father helped smuggle Austrian Jews into Yugoslavia because we thought it'd be safe there. It wasn't. Our family escaped to North Africa, where we were supposed to get on a boat to China. A man took our money, but the boat never came. We were in and out of concentration camps all the way to Italy. One day, our family hid under blankets in a wagon to escape from a camp. We lived from village to village in the mountains in Italy until we found one village where we stayed with people who were actually kind to us. We asked for lodging. We tried to explain to a woman that was willing to put us up that we were all Jews. She answered, but these Jews are also Christians. I don't think I've ever heard a more compassionate way of putting it. Everyone is a human being and deserves to live. Many times over, people saved our lives. My uncle heard about a boat coming to America, and we were lucky to be chosen. Lake Ontario is for me another ocean, separating the old world from the new world. Before I came to the shelter, I had never gone to school. Here in Oswego, the teachers are wonderful. But what good is it to have all these opportunities and still not be free? We would have to make the best of it. I remember when I came to the shelter, a man drew an outline of a bare foot on a piece of brown paper. I was ashamed, but happy to receive a pair of shoes. After a few months, I am going to school. Quakers organized arts, crafts, sports, singing and dancing. I acted in plays, and for a short time, peace has occurred. I joined the scout troop. It is the most exciting time for me. We all spoke different languages, and Clarky didn't speak anything but English. But it wasn't long before we could all understand each other and work together. We had a giant paper drive and raised enough money for uniforms. See? We even made a presentation for Mrs. Roosevelt when she visited the shelter. I had a chance to lead off telling her what it meant to be in America. Afterward, she shook our hands and made us all feel special. Once, when I was sick, my 5th grade teacher came to visit me at the camp. She later invited my family to her house. I felt special. It was the first time I started to hope and dream to be like every other child. I like to come here and look through the fence and wave at Clarky. All the scouts do it. We don't know if he's looking, but it doesn't matter.
It's dangerous on that ladder. It's dangerous everywhere. There's death everywhere. I don't like it here. I don't like it anywhere. My life was wonderful once. My husband and I had 2 wonderful children. We lived in our homeland in Yugoslavia. We were happy. But then I fell out of love with my husband and in love with Gisa. We were in love. Was it wrong? I don't know. I divorced my husband, but in doing so, I had to give up both my children. I didn't want to, but I had to. And now I don't know what's happened to them. Gisa and I have 2 sons together, Ronnie and George. We've lived in the shelter a few months now. Little George is only almost a year old. But now, both of them have come down with a whooping cough. And I've been up day and night with them. I'm so tired. But I have to get them better. I've lost so much already. I abandoned my 2 older children in my homeland. They may be dead. I don't know. If they are, it's my fault. My fault. I killed them. And I can't lose my 2 little ones as well. Gisa asked me to go to the movies with him. I told him I was too tired. He insisted. I told him I would join him later. After he left, I took a bottle of aspirin and I swallowed them all. It was December. It was my first winter in the shelter. It was cold and snowy. When I walked out of the barracks, with so many at the movies, no one missed me. The wind, there was a 50-mile-an-hour wind blowing, the snow everywhere. I walked out of the barracks, and I walked, and I walked. I got colder and weaker. I could go no further. So I sat down in the snow on the banks of the canal by the river. There was no more pain, no more regrets, no more suffering. They found me the next morning, but it was too late. The wind and the snow had taken away all my guilt and all my past. If there's such a thing as freedom for a tortured soul, I found it that night, in the cold, in the snow.
One of the refugees arranged for a group of shelter residents to help Gisa care for his 2 small sons. Karoline was buried in Oswego's Riverside Cemetery. on Sunday, December 31st, 1944, with a great number of friends in attendance. Sadness had swept over the shelter, like the cold winds off Lake Ontario. We all have different dreams. We all have different nightmares. How we deal with them is part of the story of the human condition. Some, like Karoline, saw no future out of her depression and despondency, out of her past. Others found that they could make a difference and make the present and the future a better place for everyone.
Do you hear that? I wrote that. Music is my life. Has been my life. Music is the language that needs no words. Unlike most of the refugees that were Jewish, I am a Roman Catholic. My politics, not my faith, put me in concentration camps. It appears that Nazis don't like social democrats. But if you play an instrument, politics doesn't matter. Language doesn't matter. Faith doesn't matter. Music is for everyone. To organize musical life in the shelter was my first day when we arrived here. Music had always been a blessing to me, even when times were good, since music had been my profession. I was a composer of a conductor of an orchestra in Baden, near Brienna. I was a composer too. Therefore, when I came to the shelter, I created an orchestra. My orchestra in the sense of the word. Because before, I had only been appointed as a conductor of a strange orchestra that was made up of many professional musicians, but not created by me. Therefore, I'm proud to have created the Ontario Orchestra. It's a small orchestra with few professional musicians, but everybody plays with zeal and joy. Even the singers help create the musical life of the shelter. I've also created a school to teach music. Piano, violin, and theory are the main subjects that we teach in this school. I've written much music since I've come to the shelter. Songs and operetta. Music, music, music. We must have music in our life. Music to tell our stories. Music to lift us up, to celebrate. Music to set our dreams to flight. Even music of sadness to cure our breaking hearts. No matter what, no matter where, we must have music in our life. Come now, before we leave, an operetta.
The end. Freedom was near. Over 980 refugees had arrived at Fort Ontario Emergency Refugee Shelter in August 1944. Now, it was December 31st, 1945, New Year's Eve. During the nearly 18 months, the residents of the shelter had celebrated births, marriages, holidays, and mourned tragic deaths and the loss of family members. Defense, a symbol to some of captivity, to others security, although breached, had not come down, but would soon open to freedom. Some refugees had already returned to their homes across Europe. Not knowing what they would find, they chose to return to look for loved ones and help rebuild the shattered nations of their heritage. The refugees had come to America expecting freedom as new Americans, but instead found quota systems and vast amounts of bureaucratic red tape that locked the gates in front of them. They lived on American soil, but were not even afforded the privilege of immigrant status. They brought with them a past filled with diversity of knowledge, skill, and hope, but found themselves in their present life without identity, their future an unknown. Those who had known freedom had had it stolen from them by the atrocities of the Holocaust in the shelter, while they had not known freedom. It would come soon. As members of the great human family, we all weave a fabric that reaches back in one continuous weave to the dawn of humanity, and whose length is being ever woven by the day-to-day experiences of us all. Each of our stories is but a single thread, but when woven together forms a living testament to both the endurance of the human spirit and the strength of faith. History is carried within our life experiences, and together we carry the hope of a tomorrow made brighter by the lessons we all share. At times in history, the fabric that has been woven is cut and broken, but the strength of the unbroken strands continues the journey of life. It is true, there have always been refugees. Those at Fort Ontario are but one small chapter in the history books. Yet the lessons of those times remain the same. Humanity can only survive if it embraces the diversity within itself, helps the helpless, gives homes to the homeless, and fosters a new page in civilization's march toward a future of promise. In 1946, buses were loaded and took the remaining refugees from Oswego across the Rainbow Bridge to Canada, where the refugees were given the proper identification papers so they could return to the United States, not as refugees, but as immigrants. They had a new identity and a new nation they could call home, America.
Come on, are you ready? Music. We present The Golden Cage. Ready? Begin.
We guests of Roosevelt, expecting a new world, might treat us as their friend.
Oh, how happy we shall be again. War will finish and we are not slain. We shall live and love and thank our God that he saved us from the hangman's plot.
Although millions have been killed and gone, his almighty will has newly shown that his justice will not die nor render, that his heart is eternally tender.
He who freed us from the very murder will now lead us to his peace and order. Never mind the madhouse and the trip.
We are happy waiting for the ship. Blessed be the day of our coming. Bless you, country of our dream.
Now all our hearts are blooming, and our troubles flown away.
Let us kiss the birth of freedom, kiss the earth where justice grew, throw beneath the pastime's gloom, and take new courage on our way.
Force and beauty built this city, powerful and like a fairy tale. Greets us the Statue of Liberty. Amidst this glory, let's be gay.
I feel myself a monkey.
In a zoological garden. Are we to be on display?
There's missing but the warden.
What are we, a sensation?
For tedious people's pleasure,
I can only see prison.
Not Roosevelt's guest and leisure.
What world are we to live in? What have we then committed?
We are in a cage without reason. We are in a cage, a golden cage. We're missing nothing but the freedom.
redeem us from the flame which grieves our mind. Give us our will to life, to work, to truth. Cut with your sword the now that keeps us bound. Melt with your breath the hate against the Jews.
Give orders that they let us stay in your beloved free nation. Start us to life, we shall be gay, and praise you in admiration.
Murray Good evening.